愿神丰盛的恩典赐给我们在座的每一位。
May the abundant grace of God be given to all of the attendees today.
感谢神，很难得今天又来到了安息圣日。
And this is a precious day that we can have this opportunity to come here to worship God.
我们可以借着安息圣日共聚一堂，来领受神的话语。
And in this Sabbath day worship, we're here to receive His words.
所以神的祝福是应该可以临到我们在座的每一位的。
Therefore, I believe that the blessings of God will be bestowed upon everyone who is standing today.
那今天早上要用神的操练原是爱。
And this morning, I would like to use this topic, God's love with God's trials with His love.
我想大概在世界级的运动会就是奥林匹克的运动赛。
If you look at all those Olympic tournaments,
那个运动赛场那些健将。
And you look at all of those athletes who participated in the Olympic Games.
他们不是一天可以成名的。
They didn't become an Olympic athlete just because of a day of practice.
所以他也许从年轻就开始训练。
And maybe they have been training since they were young.
那为了就是要得奖。
And all for the sake of gaining a title.
所以这个得奖得名就成为他激励的一种力量。
Therefore, to receive the trophies and also recognition becomes the motivation behind.
那有的人为了得更需要的那个奖项
And there are even a few of them even wanted the recognition so badly.
他除了训练以外，还要接受操练。
And other than the regular training, he will have to go through extra extreme trainings.
那这种操练呢，就成为磨练的一种经过。
And you could put it this way that it is a trial for those athletes because going through them, it will make them into a better one.
所以简单说呢，你要得成绩，要训练。
In a simple nutshell, if you want to have a good result, you need to go through all kinds of training.
更要得到那种超然的那种，更要接受磨练。
And also, you need to be able to undertake all these stringent trainings.
我想这就是在我们所看的运动会的赛场，那些健将所展现出来的。
And you can see how they perform in this Olympic Games of their skills.
那今天我们在信仰生活上面，
And today, it applies to our faith today.
是不是经过训练，或者是经过磨练呢？
If we look at our faith, have we ever gone through this kind of trial and training?
也许我们把这种训练跟磨练，好像神特别对我们来对付才有的。
And perhaps this kind of training and trial is only given by God to us.
其实，在我们信仰的人生里头，
In fact, in our life of faith,
你不管是训练也好，
it doesn't matter if it's a training
或者是磨练也好，
or even if you call it as a trial.
我想在你的信仰生活上面所经历的这些的经过，
I believe that all these experiences that you accumulated throughout your life,
神来训练你或者操练你，不是没有原因。
and there's always reason behind why God has given you such a training or a trial.
神这么做，他的重点就是要来操练、来磨练我们更坚强的信心。
And the reason why God is doing the trial to you is because He wants to strengthen your faith.
不过在这种训练的过程上面，
And throughout this process of training,
也许我们感觉到很痛苦、很难过，
maybe we will be feeling the pain.
也许会感受到好像超出我所能忍受的。
Maybe we will be experiencing burdens that's heavier than we can take.
就好比希伯来书里头所讲的一样，
And just like into what is spoken in the book of Hebrews,
在管教的事上，会让你感觉到你的难过与痛苦。
in the days of God's teaching, you will feel the pain.
没有错，神来这样来训练我们，
Now, of course, this is the way that God is training us.
他的重点就是要来提高我们每个人对神的信心。
And the emphasis of that is to strengthen our faith towards God.
因此，今天我们要透过圣经来认识
Therefore, through the Bible that we're reading today, we understand God.
神对我们的操练，原是神对我们的爱。
And all of this training and trials, so as to speak, from God is because of the love of God.
我们看一段圣经里头所记载的一个经过。
Let's look at a passage from the Bible.
我们首先来看《申命记》，
Let's first turn to Deuteronomy.
《申命记》的32章，
Deuteronomy chapter 32.
在32章第10节跟11节里面呢，
Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 10 and 11.
这是神透过他的工人摩西来对以色列百姓所讲述神的作为。
So through the worker of God, Moses, he spoke to the chosen people of God.
所以在第10节这里提到说呢，神他在旷野甚至在这种荒凉野兽吼叫的地方
It says here, even in a desert land or in the wasteland.
就围绕这些百姓。
And there was people surrounding there.
可是神看顾跟保护他们
But then God has protected them and looked after them.
这种看顾跟保护呢，就好像保护人的眼中的瞳人那样。
So looking after the people of God is just likened to him treating them as the apple of his eye.
这么记载就是神会来看顾、来照顾他的百姓。
The reason why God mentioned this in the Bible because he is taking care of his people.
这种看顾跟保护呢，就好像我们保护人眼中的瞳孔一样。
And this kind of caring and protection from God is just likened to how God sees us as the apple of his eye.
神造人的眼睛本来非常的细腻，
And God has created man's eye a very delicate organ.
不容一粒的沙粒来侵入到你的眼睛、眼球上面。
It doesn't take any dust or stone or into your eyes.
但是呢，神他就看顾这种眼睛中的瞳人那样。
But this is how God is looking after your eyes.
那在第11节又继续说到一个比喻的事情。
And also at verse 11, there's a parable here.
这种比喻呢，就用鹰来做叙述。
So there's a description on an eagle.
这个鹰呢，搅动这个巢窝
It says over here, as an eagle stirs up its nest, hovers over its young.
我想我们看到这种动物世界里头的记载的报道
I believe that if you observe many of the documentary about animals,
应该会看到这种鹰筑巢都是在树梢的上面。
and you notice that eagles, they build their nest on high mountains.
所以呢，这个鹰它会搅动这个巢窝。
So the Bible says here, eagle stirs up its nest.
巢窝是它在抚育这些雏鹰的一个住的地方
The nest is where the eagle took care of its young.
可是说鹰会搅动这个巢窝，
However, it says here, eagle stirs up its nest.
那如果巢窝里头有小鹰的话，那怎么办？
And what is going to happen if there are young eagles in the nest?
这些小鹰一定会掉出来
And all these young eagles will fall out from the nest.
不只是会掉出来，说不定就会摔死了。
And not only they will fall out from the nest, they may even be killed
所以
by falling out of it.
圣经就继续在细述说了，
And then the Bible continued and said,
当窝倾倒之后，这个雏鹰它就2次就散展开来
So when the eagle stirs up its nest, hover over its young, spreading out its wings, taking them up.
表示呢，这个雏鹰它为了要展现它原本的飞翔的动力，
So then suddenly these young eagles has been stirred up to spread out their wings.
所以它的翅膀就本能性的就张开了。
So naturally they spread out their wings.
那个时候它就会扇动它的翅膀。
And that is the time where they flap their wings.
那如果那个翅膀不够羽毛长得不够细、不够多的时候
And if their wings are not fully grown with feathers,
当然这个雏鹰就从上面直接掉下来了，
and definitely this young eagle will fall from the nest to the ground.
严重就摔死了。
And then it perhaps will kill the young eagle.
那跟前面的第10节来做比较的话，就差很多。
So if you compare to verse 10, it is quite different.
神会照顾以色列百姓，如保护眼中的瞳人那样。
It says over here, God will take care of Israelites, just like into how he see them as the apple of his eye.
啊，这对雏鹰呢，它展开翅膀又不能飞翔，那摔死那怎么办？
So what does the eagle do when the young eagle fall out from the nest and killed?
那在第11节的接下来，他就说了，
And then at verse 11 it said,
这个老鹰呢，他就赶快去撅起那个雏鹰啊，
so this mother eagle quickly taking them up.
就背在2翼的上面。
It says here carrying them on his wings.
也等于是老鹰在飞翔呢，它就快速的往这个雏鹰的底下去把它撑住。
Which means to say that this mother eagle will quickly fly to the young eagle that is falling to catch them.
看到圣经的这么简单的描述，
And this is a simple description in the Bible.
也许你看不出当中要告诉我们的是什么的意思。
Perhaps you don't really understand the significance of such a description,
在这里头所告诉我们呢，
but yet it's telling us
神的训练就好比母鹰在训练小鹰那样。
the training of these eagles is likened to how God is training all of us.
母鹰故意把它的巢把它打翻，
So this mother eagle intentionally stirred up its nest,
然后让巢中的这个小鹰就掉出来了。
and so that all these young eagles will fall out from the nest.
那这个时候呢，母鹰就往它的那个底部把它撑住，把它接起来。
And that is the moment when the young eagle is falling, in the midst of falling, the mother eagle will quickly fly below them to catch them.
所以当我们看10节跟11节里头的记载，
So if you look at verse 10 and 11,
告诉我们在宇宙中，在动物界的里头，
these are telling us that even among the animals,
神一样用这种方式来训练我们。
and God is using the same way to train all of us.
所以今天我们也许就遇到了这种特殊的操练。
And perhaps some of us are actually facing this kind of training now.
这种特殊的操练，你不能把它看作是训练，
And this kind of special training, you cannot just treat it as ordinary
你
training.
应该把它看为神给你的磨练，
And you should treat it as a trial from God.
就好像母鹰，那个母鹰在训练那个雏鹰那样的做法，
And just like unto how the mother eagle treat its own young eagles.
故意把那个巢穴把它打翻。
So it intentionally stirred up its nest.
如果我们用那个慈爱的眼光来看这个老鹰的话，
And if we look at all these young eagles from the merciful eyes of the mother eagle,
这个自己生的这个小鹰，你也用这种态度来对待它，
and they are your own babies, why are you treating them this way?
这是人对它的看法的一面。
And this is how men see from the mother's side.
就好比今天我们有称为说，哇，你这家里的妈宝。
And just like into how we call some of the child at home as a spoiled kid.
哦，不只是妈宝，也许是八宝。
Not only is a spoiled kid, it perhaps is a spoiled brat.
就这种父母亲的爱，就太过于疼爱自己的儿女了。
Because the love from the parents were spoiling the children.
结果在这种情况下，会造成你的儿女成为温室中的花朵。
And under that kind of treatment from the parents, your kids will someday just become someone in the greenhouse.
所以，当你的儿女造成为温室中的花朵，那个责任要归谁？
If they becomes one of the flowers in the greenhouse, who is responsible for that?
这个责任要归为父母啊。
Of course, this responsibility falls upon the shoulders of parents.
所以，也许当你年纪大了以后，
And perhaps after years when you grow older,
你看到自己的儿女说：“奇怪，我的儿女怎么这么长不大呢？”
and you look back and look at your children and realize that how come they did not grow up?
20岁了，30岁了，怎么跟小孩子差不多？
And they're already 20 years old, they're already 30 years old, they behave like kids.
就是因为父母亲没有像老鹰训练雏鹰那种方法。
It's because the parents has never used the way how the mother eagle trained the young eagles.
所以难怪到了30岁、40岁还像小孩子一样。
And that's the very reason why we notice some of the children at their age of 30, 40, they still behave like a kid.
所以今天我们看到这个母鹰在训练小鹰的这种经过来看，
So today, if you were to observe how this mother eagle was training its own child,
当中就是看到神的爱。
and you will notice the love of God.
从动物，从这种这个鸟类，它的精神来转换，看为神对人呐、
We can notice this love from the animal and understand such kind of love and apply it to us.
也等于是这些以色列百姓在经过旷野路的生活的过程上面，
And in the process where the Israelites were traveling in the wilderness,
一样神来训练这些以色列百姓。
in the same way God has trialed them.
不是神不爱这些以色列百姓，
It is not that God did not love the Israelites,
神的做法就好像母鹰在训练小鹰那样。
but rather it was a way of God's trial for them as if the mother eagle is training its own child.
可是这些以色列百姓偏偏不堪一击啊！
But you realize that Israelites, they just cannot withstand such a trial.
所以难怪要在旷野路走了40年之久。
And that's the reason why they've been going around in the wilderness for 40 years.
不是只有走40年之久，
They have not only traveled for 40 years alone,
有些人还没办法进到神所预备的迦南美地啊！
there are still a lot of them, they could not enter into the promised land, Canaan.
所以有些人在旷野就倒闭了，就死掉了。
And there are a lot of people die in the wilderness.
所以像这些经过，
So if you look at the entire process,
都告诉我们说，神对我们的训练
it's telling us that God will give us the training and trial.
里头全部是神的爱。
And within such a trial, you could see the love of God.
当然，也许我们正处在这种被操练的当中，
Of course, maybe some of us are in the midst of such a training.
那我们怎么办？
What can we do?
你有没有学习鹰的精神？
And have you ever learned from the spirit of the eagle?
我们再看一下以赛亚书，
Let's turn to the book of
以
Isaiah.
赛亚书40章，
Let's turn to the book of Isaiah, chapter 40.
以赛亚书40章的30节
，Isaiah chapter 40, verse 30.
，40章的30节，
The book of Isaiah, chapter 40, verse 30.
应该从29节看起好了哈。
Perhaps
29
we'll
节
read it from verse 29.
一起来读
Let's read it together.
29节读到31节，
Let's read from verse 29 to 31.
中文、英文都可以。
And you can choose to read either in English or Chinese.
29节，预备起，疲乏的他是能力，软弱的他加力量。30节，就是少年人也要疲乏困倦，强壮的也必全然跌倒。31节，到那等候耶和华的必重新得力，他们必如鹰展翅上腾，他们奔跑却不困倦，行走却不疲乏。阿门。
Amen.
刚才我们所看的这几个经节，
And we have just read these 3 verses.
就是另外换一个先知，他在讲述神他的训练。
And this is another prophet that's expounding on how God's trial is all about.
一样又提到鹰要展翅长腾，
In the same way, he has mentioned about this eagle mounting up his wings.
那能够鹰展翅上腾的原则之下怎么做呢？
So how does this eagle mount up his wings?
在31节开始就说，
Over at verse 31, it said,
唯一的条件就是要等候神呐、
one of the conditions that you need to fulfill is to await for God.
等候神必重新得力啊。
And if you await for God's moment, you will be renewed.
所以这种重新得力人，就好像鹰展翅长腾那样。
And those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with the wings like eagles.
那从29节跟30节这里又告诉我们了，
And over at verse 29 and 30,
说人的本性会疲乏，
It tells us that as men, we shall faint or be weary
人
sometimes.
的本性也会软弱。
And at times we'll feel weak.
可是等候神的，他就是力量。
But for those who will wait on the Lord, will gain strength.
等候神的，从软弱就必得力量。
And for those who wait on the Lord will be renewed.
接下来30节就说呢，
And over at 30 it said,
这个人的本性也是这样啊。
and even people of God will behave this way.
少年也会疲乏困倦。
Even the youth shall faint and be weary.
我们知道这个少年人年轻力壮啊，
We know that as a youth, it is the strongest time in one's lifetime.
怎么也会疲乏，也会困倦呢？
And how come this youth become faint and weary?
接下来说，强壮的也必全然跌倒。
And it also said a later part of this verse, it says that the young men shall utterly fall.
所以从30节所告诉我们，
And over this verse 30 it said,
这是人的本性。
this is the nature of man.
人的本性会疲乏，会困倦，
This is nature of man that we will be exhausted at times.
甚至会跌倒。
And even at times we fall.
所以人的本性会产生这种软弱之下。
And therefore, because of such kind of human weakness,
你如果有死神的祝福的人
and for those who are blessed by God,
你就会等候神。
you will be awaiting on the Lord.
等候神的人，你就必重新得力。
And for those who wait on the Lord, you shall renew your strength.
重新得力的人，就好像鹰在展翅上腾那
And
样。
for those who are renewed in their strength, they shall mount up with wings, just like the eagles.
刚才我们看到摩西在讲述那个鹰的训练的经过。
And we have read how Moses described about the mother eagle training his young.
先知以赛亚在这里又提出来了，
And over here, Prophet Isaiah mentioned again
一个等候神的人
that for a person who wait on the Lord
会重新得力。
and shall renew their strength.
这种人就好像鹰在展翅上腾那样，
And this kind of person is just, they will mount up their wings like eagles.
就好比母鹰训练雏鹰长大一样，
That is how the mother eagle trained their young.
它就会展翅上腾。
And they will spread their wing and then hovers.
根据动物频道的介绍，
And just like into the animal documentary film that I saw.
这个鹰大概在40年的成长过程里面，
And within this 40-year of lifespan of an eagle,
它的身体会渐渐疲乏，
and its body will become weaker.
甚至它的嘴这个上唇会凸出来，会长得很长。
And even his upper beak will grow longer than the lower beak.
这种上唇长得很长的时候，它要吃东西，那怎么吃啊？
So how is the eagle supposed to consume food when the upper beak is growing longer than the lower
因
one?
为被这个上唇挡住了
Because it's blocked by the upper beak.
所以你要靠上唇去咬东西是难的。
Therefore, it is very hard for the eagle to bite when this upper beak is longer than the lower
所以
one.
那个动物频道在介绍说，鹰活到40年的时候，
So this documentary film actually explained how this eagle is going to live his life when he's coming to his 40 years of life.
它要去转换它的生命。
And he will have to renew his life.
怎么去转换？
How can he renew his life?
它要飞到很高的那个岩石的山壁上面，
And he would have to fly very high into the cliff of the mountain.
用它一切的生命去凿那个石头，
And using all his strength to use his beak to knock at the cliff.
然后让这个凸出来这个唇去把它磨掉，把它削掉。
And the effort is just to cut away the extra portion of his beak.
所以当削掉的时候，它这个2个唇才会一样长啊。
So it is only when it is able to break off the extra part of the beak can he bite properly.
这样才能够吃东西啊。
And that is how he can consume food once again.
除了这个嘴唇会这样的以外
And other than the beak that behaves that way,
它的羽毛经过40年的飞翔在空中淋雨了、暴雪了，所以呢，它那个羽毛会渐渐凋谢。
And after 40 years of rain and storm, his wings will gradually losing some of the feathers.
所以在老化的过程上面，
So in this process of growing older,
它没有再长出新的那个羽毛，它就没办法再飞翔了。
if it's not able to grow any more a new feather, he will not be able to fly ever again.
所以他接下来要把那个旧的羽毛一只一只把它拔掉。
Therefore, he would have to pull out all of those feather one by itself.
然后剩下来就是它的爪，
And then comes to his claws.
它的爪很厉害啊。
And his claws are very dangerous.
我们如果从那个动物频道去看的时候，
If you look at some of the documentary film,
你看到那个爪，它可以，那个冲刺到那个水的底下，然后那个爪可以马上把水中的鱼把它抓上来。
the eagle can quickly fall to the water level and using his claw to catch fish from the river.
甚至呢，它可以再把那个岸石上面在走的那个羊啊，可以把它抓起来，然后挥到山上，把它掉下来。
Even sometimes they are able to catch the running lambs on the ground and pull them to the sky.
然后呢，它就可以到上面的时候就把那个羊又放开，所以那个羊就掉下来。
So they will take the lamb all the way into the sky and drop it and kill it.
它掉下来呢，它就会撞到地上或者撞到山壁，所以那个羊就死掉。
So because the lamb has been dropped off from high sky, as it land on the ground, it will die.
那老鹰的速度很快就冲下来啊，
So you could see that the speed of the eagle is so fast.
就马上把那个鹰又抓起来，就成为它的食物了。
And he will quickly take hold of this dead lamb and then become his food.
所以如果没有那么的锐利的那个爪，根本是抓不动的。
And without such a ferocious claws, he was not able to catch all this prey.
所以你在动物频道看这些的介绍，你就知道鹰原来到了40年以后，它要经过第二段的它的生命的改造。
So if you look at the documentary film, you realize that after 40 years of their life, they try to renew their own life.
所以从我刚才简单的介绍以外，
And other than my simple introduction just now,
我们从里头去看出来神的作为。
and we could look into it and realize that there is the act of God.
那个老鹰啊，比一般的鸟飞得还要高啊！
And eagle can fly so high, higher than all other kind of birds.
所以把那个老鹰称为是千里眼啊，看得很远，
And for eagles, they have long distance vision.
而且又飞得高海拔很高的地方啊。
And also they can fly so high.
因为飞得高就看得远，
And as they fly high, they are able to see so broadly.
所以在圣经树活物里头特别强调鹰啊。
And that's the reason why the Bible has this description of the 4 living creatures, and one of which is an eagle.
所以从当中我们了解到鹰的这种特性啊。
So from here we understand the characteristics of an eagle.
根据刚才我们所看的《生命记》的32章里头的介绍啊，
So from the Bible verse that we have read from Deuteronomy chapter 32,
我们会看到神他把自己比喻看作是鹰，
and God has treated himself as the eagle.
那把我们看为我们是他的儿女，
And he looked at us just like his young eagles.
这个就是雏鹰。
And that is the young eagles.
所以呢，我们就好比在神怀抱中的雌鹰那样。
So we're just like the young eagle that is in the bosom of God.
所以呢，神他用这种精神来带领以色列百姓。
And God has used this kind of principle to lead the Israelites.
问题这些以色列百姓，他们真的应着景象的百姓啊。
So all these Israelite people, they are very stubborn.
这是之前我曾经都讲过的这个话题啊。
And like what I have spoken about this in the past.
所以今天我们处在这种信仰的生活上面，
So today in our life of faith,
我们要懂得来依靠神。
we must know how to depend on God.
如果一个懂得来依靠神的人，
For those who knows how to rely on God,
你的整个人生、你的精气，那个就会很充沛啊。
And your life will be full of abundance.
也成为你的力量源源不绝啊！
And it will become your strength that will never cease.
你就会像这只老鹰那种精神一样的，
And just like unto this eagle, you will have the same kind of spirit.
一展开翅膀就是飞翔，
Once you spread your wings, it's a time for you to fly.
飞得高又飞得远。
If you're able to hover and fly, you're able to fly this long distance.
而且你在奔跑都不疲乏，
And as you run, you will never be tired.
你行走都不困倦。
As you walk, you will never be exhausted.
所以，当我们来看出呢，这种鹰的精神真的很特别。
So the spirit of this eagle is very special.
所以呢，当我们从圣经了解到鹰的这种习性很特别啊，
So also from the Bible's description of the eagle, we know that it's special.
我们也可以从圣经来看一些人物，他们的精神就跟鹰差不多。
In the same way, we'll look at some of the characters in the Bible. They're just eagle-like.
我首先来用这个保罗做比喻。
So Paul will be the first character.
我们来看一下《使徒行传》的12章，
Please turn to book of Acts chapter 12.
《使徒行传》12章，
Book of Acts chapter 12.
在第4节一直到16章啊，不是14章。
Excuse me, it's chapter 16.
16章的22节，
Book of Acts chapter 16, verse 22.
在22节
At verse 22,
一直到25节，
22 to verse 25.
在这边就看到保罗跟希拉因此传福音被打，又被下在监狱里头。
This passage talk about how Paul and Silas has been imprisoned for the sake of preaching the gospel.
那在24节就说了，
Over at verse 24, it said,
这个禁主呢就领了这个命令啊，要把他们下在内监里头，两脚又上了木狗。
it says here, having received such a charge, he put them into the inner prison and fastened their feet in the stocks.
我想，如果一般人大概会吓得大概破胆了，脚都软掉了，说不定啊。
Ordinary person may be so frightened when they encounter this kind of situation.
那我说呢，保罗他有鹰的精神，就在这里产生。
Because Paul has the spirit of an eagle, therefore he was able to triumph
我们
over here.
继续再看25节。
Let's continue reading verse 25.
约在半夜，保罗和希拉祷告、唱诗、赞美神。
It says at verse 25, but at midnight Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God,
众囚犯也侧耳而听啊，
and the prisoners were listening to them.
描述到保罗跟希拉一点都不怕。
This is a description of how Paul and Silas were so unafraid of.
为什么他不怕？
Why were they so brave?
就刚才我用那个母鹰在训练小鹰那个精神来看，
And if you look at Paul and Silas from how the eagles behave,
保罗知道说这是神给他的一种操练。
and Paul knew better that this is the trial from God.
保罗他的心中也深深知道，
And Paul knew that very well.
像这个小鹰知道说母鹰一定会来救我，
And just like into the young eagle, Paul knew that God will save him just like the mother eagle.
所以在一瞬间，那个小鹰在空中飞翔，他就拼命的在挣扎它的翅膀。
So as the young eagle were trying so hard to flap its wings and fly in the sky.
当这个小鹰翅膀展开之后，
And once this young eagle were able to spread its wings,
这个母鹰动作很快，
and this mother wing will quickly
把它插到这个小鹰的底部，把它撑住了。
going under this young eagle and carry them.
所以这个小鹰训练它就不会受伤。
So this is the way that the mother eagle trained the young so that they will not be hurt.
所以保罗就是这样经过的。
And this is how Paul has experienced.
他知道神会拯救他，
And he knew better that God will save him.
所以他只有来唱诗、来赞美、祷告神。
So that's the reason why he prayed and sang hymns.
这就是与众不同的保罗跟希拉。
So you notice that Paul and Silas were so different from the rest of the crowd.
这个就是保罗他有鹰的这种眼光。
It is because Paul has this kind of the same kind of spirit as an eagle.
所以这个就是保罗他所经过的了。
And Paul has a similar experience.
那刚才我有提到那个使徒行传的12章啊。
And also I mentioned just now the book of Acts chapter 12.
这个12章也是讲述到这个彼得啊。
And book of Acts chapter 12 talk about Peter.
在使徒行传的12章的第4节开始啊。
So if you read from book of Acts chapter 12 verse 4 and on.
这个一样在描述这个彼得。
It is also a description of Peter.
彼得他仍然有这种锐利的眼光啊。
And Peter has the same kind of sharp vision as an eagle.
所以在第4节就开始记载说，这个叙利亚这个王啊，就抓住了彼得，把他下在监里头了。
So at verse 4, it talks about how King Herod has arrested him and put him into the jail.
在这个过程上面呢，彼得他就交付4班的兵丁来看守着他们。
And then they have sent squads of soldiers to keep him.
我想在这种情况下，彼得他如果会长翅膀，也会不出去的啦。
Even at this moment, if Peter were to have wings, he will not be able to fly away.
因为在前面的第6节在描述啊。
Because over at verse 6 it said.
说希律要将他呢，希律将要提他出来前的一个晚上啊。
So it says over here, and when Herod was about to bring him out, that night Peter was sleeping.
圣经描述彼得当时的状况。
So this is a description of what Peter was doing at that time.
他的身体是被2条铁链把他锁住。
So he was bound with 2 chains between 2 soldiers.
他的身旁又设了2个兵丁。
And also there are 2 soldiers beside him.
这2个兵丁不是来服侍他的呢。
And the 2 soldiers were not there to serve him.
看着彼得，怕他逃跑。
But they're guarding on Peter just in case he escaped.
不止这样哦。
Not only so.
连那个监牢的外面呢，都还有加派兵丁看守啊。
And even outside of the prison, the squads of soldiers has been deployed to safeguard him.
所以我才说，彼得长翅都挥不出去了。
That's why I said even Peter were to have wings, he would not be able to fly away.
可是那个时候，彼得他怕不怕？
So at that very moment, was Peter afraid or frightened?
他一点都不怕。
I don't think he was frightened.
为什么说呢？
Why did I say that?
第7节在记载着说，
So over at verse 7 it said,
当时有一个使者就站在旁边了。
And now behold, an angel of the Lord stood by him.
那整个屋里头就有光来照耀着了。
And a light shone in the prison.
那个时候，天使就拍彼得的肋旁，
And he struck Peter on his side
叫他说：“行了，行了，快起来哦！”
and raised him up.
一瞬间，那个身体上那个铁链就掉落下来了。
And all of a sudden his chains fell off from his hands.
天使还指示说：“你现在赶快怎么做，怎么做。”
And so the angel quickly gave him the instructions that arise quickly.
从圣经所告诉我们，
So the Bible is telling us,
彼得怕不怕？
was Peter afraid of anything?
我问大家
Let me ask everyone,
彼得怕不怕？
do you think
不
that
怕，
Peter
对
was，frightened?
很有精神。
No, he was not
一点
afraid
都不
of
怕。
anything. He
因为
was not frightened at all.
因为怕的人睡不着，
Because for a person who's frightened, he
所以
was not able to fall
彼
into
得
sleep.
一点都不怕，
Therefore, Peter was not frightened.
睡得很熟啊。
And in fact, he was sleeping soundly.
那天使来叫：“彼得，快起来，起来，起来！”
Even the angel will have to wake him up and tell him to arise
圣
quickly.
经描述当时的彼得，他迷迷糊糊，我接下来要跑去哪里呀？
And then at that time, the Bible says that he thought that he had a vision.
说可见彼得那个时候的心情很平静。
And I believe that at that time, the heart of Peter was in peace.
所以从保罗或者彼得来看，
So if you look at Peter or Paul,
他现在所感受的是神的恩典。
At that very moment, the only thing that they experienced was the love of God.
为什么说是神的恩典呢？
Why did I say that is the love of God?
彼得、保罗他们
Because for Peter and Paul,
为什么不发生在希律的身上？
why did it not happen? Nothing happens to King Herod.
这是配跟不配的问题。
This is whether God sees someone deemed worth it or not worth it.
这就是看出保罗跟彼得他们都等候神。
So you could see that Paul and also Peter awaited on the Lord.
所以刚才我们看出来的，他一个共同点，
And you could see the commonality of both Paul and Peter.
他们的共同点是什么？你们看出来没有？
What is the common points of them?
啊，看出来没有？
Did you notice that?
祷告，
It's to pray.
一定要祷告，
You must pray.
唱诗、祷告、赞美神。
That you pray and also sing hymns to praise the Lord.
哎，在这种不自由的环境下，可以唱诗祷告啊！
Under this situation of confinement, you are still able to pray.
这个不是恩典，那是什么？
If this is not the grace of God, then
所以
what it is?
真的是神的恩典呐、
It is truly the grace of God.
所以只有保罗、彼得他们等候神，向神祷告，所以他们配得这一份的恩典。
And the reason why Paul and Peter is worthy of the grace of God because they prayed.
然后从当中他们所经过的看到什么？
And from what they have experienced, have we noticed
看到
this?
神对他们的操练。
That God has given them such a trial.
所以美国如果在信仰的生活上面遭遇任何困难，
So in our life of faith, if we ever experience any kind of challenge,
你一定要看出我们内心的稳定性。
you must look into how stable you are.
所说的内心的稳定，就是说要祷告、唱诗来赞美神。
So if you look at your inner self, then you should pray and also sing hymns.
因为当中你会看出这是神给你的操练。
And you will see that this is the very trial that God has given you.
那当你在这种操练的过程上面，
So in this process of trial,
你不埋怨，
and you will never complain.
你不气馁，
You will never give up.
你仍然继续来坚持奔跑。
And you're still able to insist and continue on.
你知道这是神给你的操练，
And you know that this is the very trial that God has given you.
所以当你在这种情况之下，
Under this kind of circumstances,
你一定会感受到说这是神的爱。
and you will feel that there's always love of God with you.
刚才我们在看彼得他的经过的时候，
And as we read the story of Peter,
我们再看回到使徒行传的12章，
let's turn to book of Acts chapter 12.
在12章的第5节啊，
Chapter 12, verse 5.
第5节在描述说彼得被囚禁在监狱里头啊，
It says here, Peter was therefore kept in prison,
教会却为他切切的祷告神，
but constant prayer was offered to God for him by the church.
不是只有保罗、彼得他们祷告赞美神呢，
He was not the only one that's praying.
连教会的弟兄姐妹都特别帮他们祷告，
Even the members from the church were praying for him.
因为这个保罗彼得啦，他们本身来接受操练，
Because when Paul and Peter was undergoing this trial,
他们是那个灵战的战场，
and it is a battleground in the spirit,
是成为神操练的工具。
and it is the tool that God has used to train them.
那他们本身没有埋怨，
And they did not complain.
他们一直对神充满着爱的那种领受。
The only thing they feel is that they experience the love of God.
所以这个本身对神的领受而产生了信心。
And because they feel the love of God, therefore it is faith.
所以才有这一份的稳定力量。
And that is how they are able to have this stable power.
又加上教会的弟兄姐妹一起来帮助祷告，
And also at the same time, the people from the church were praying for them.
所以这种神的爱就从当中就被激发出来了。
And then you could see that the love of God has been invigorated among the crowd.
所以今天我们的弟兄姐妹，你如果遭受到这种操练的生活的当中，
So today, brothers and sisters, if you yourself are experiencing the trial of God at this moment,
我告诉大家，
let me tell you this.
不能埋怨，
Please do not complain.
只有心存感恩。
The only thing you should do is going through it with a heart of thanksgiving.
如果你埋怨，你就会像以色列百姓。
If you complain, you will be just likened to the Israelites.
以色列百姓在旷野路边走边埋怨，
And then those Israelites, they have been complaining every single day when they were traveling in the wilderness.
结果结局有的就死在旷野了。
Therefore, there are a lot of people die on their way.
所以我们绝对不能埋怨。
Therefore, we should not complain when we undergo trial.
那我们要从保罗、彼得他们身上来学到感恩。
And we must learn from Paul and Peter's example that we have to have a thankful heart.
因为当你体验到神的操练在我们的身上，要来成就神的作为。
Because at the end of the day, the trial of God is to manifest the acts of God.
所以我们真的要祷告神，
Therefore, we need to pray to God
也要感谢神。
and also to give thanks to God.
所以我们只能坦然接受，
And that's the reason why we need to accept all kinds of trial peacefully
心存感恩。
and with a heart of thanksgiving.
我们早上分享到这里，
And we'll share the sermon at this point.
一起来唱诗
Let's sing hymn.
332。
Please sing hymn number 332.